So here's another story from Church Mediocre or Church Ordinary that I hope you will take a little hope injection from. We talked in our first story about what the committed amateur could do. What about the eccentric amateur? I was living in Hong Kong, working as a journalist at the time, and a friend, very good friend, called me up. And he said, "Ron, what I'm about to ask you, please just say yes." And I said, "Okay, what do you mean?" Because he was a very good source. He said, "I want you to take 2 people up to Shanghai with big Bibles, big cases of Bibles. Just say yes to it." And I said, "Okay." And then he said, "Do you remember a really great little book by Corrie ten Boom?" I said, "Not really." He said, "It's called Common Sense Not Required." And I said, "Any special reason you told me that?" "No," he said, "I'm just going to leave that with you." So he said, "You'll know these 2. One's very tall, one's very skinny. And they'll be waiting for you at the meeting point in the airport." So I picked up these 5 cases, and they're brutal. They're high, they're heavy, they're 70 pounds. They're hard to lift. One of them, if you lift 2, you're in hernia territory. So I get to the airport, having picked up these 5 cases. I would take 2 in. One of them would have to take 2. One of them would take a single one. And I look at these 2 from a distance. And you know that verse? It's a very handy verse, this. From Jeremiah, it says, "Lord, you have deceived me, and I am undone." It's a great verse, that, actually, for the unexpected and the seriously disappointing. Because one of these was this one. There was a man, and he was 6'6", and he had the hairiest body I'd ever seen, and most of it was on show because he had this tiny little string vest, the shortest pair of shorts I've ever seen, a pretty large corporation that was held by a pair of braces. They're really being put through their paces. And he said, "Hi, I'm Jim. I'm a lumberjack from Canada." And I thought, yeah, did you have to wear your uniform? And I thought, you're not going to get your Bibles through because wearing so little is disrespectful. You know, the Chinese they'll give you a hard time. And then the other guy to say he was a stick insect would be to be quite optimistic. He was so thin, and he looked ill, and he probably was. His skin was the colour of putty. And I thought, he's so thin, he'll never be able to lift one of the 70-pounders. What's he going to do? And then he had another sort of wondrous feature about him. He was really nervous. He was convinced he'd been tracked to the airport by the Public Security Bureau. He kept looking around. And then he would speak, and he would get excited, and his false teeth would come out of his mouth. And he would be able to grab them and put them back in his mouth without missing a word. I mean, it was incredible. I just stared at him. He was like one of the wonders of the world. So I thought, how are these guys going to get these Bibles through? Jim, because in those days, you see, you lined up and you were given what we said was the finger. It meant they pointed to the X-ray machine. Not everybody had to put their cases on the X-ray machine. But if you were singled out, you got the finger. The finger was, go put them on the X-ray machine. Your Bibles were discovered. And that was quite a humiliation. And I thought, well, Jim won't get through because they're definitely going to, be annoyed at his outfit, frankly. Gilbert's not going to be able to even lift the thing onto a trolley, so he's not going to get through. So I thought, well, okay, I was sensible. I was quite assured in these things. I'd got a few trips behind me, and I had a nice suit on and a lovely tie, because if you appear as a businessman, it increased your chances. So we get on the plane, we pay a fortune in excess baggage, and up we fly. And we're on this plane. I'm on the aisle seat. Gilbert's beside me in the middle seat. Jim is on the opposite aisle. And then Gilbert starts to really shake very violently, and I wonder if he's having a fit. But then he says, I think I've just discovered how to beat the X-ray machine. I said, oh? He said, I'm going to put my case on it, if he could. And then he said, I'll take my own case, my little suit carrier, and I'll put it against it, and so the X-rays won't be able to see through. And that will confuse the person. And he was getting more and more worked up about this, and I wondered what to say about it. And Jim was looking across and looking like, looking pretty sorry for Gilbert. And then all of a sudden, this great hand, he stretches a hand across the aisle, and it lands on Gilbert's pate. And of course, it's right across me. And then Jim starts shouting. And he says, Lord, I pray victory. I pray power. I pray grace into this weak-kneed brother. and then, of course, everything goes silent in the plane. And then he says, Lord, you know we're carrying these Bibles. Get them through. And he proceeded to give the whole detail of the operation to everybody on the plane. And I thought, yep, we're looking forward to a diet of rice and sand in a jail for a while. Anyway, we got in, and we got through customs, or rather through passport control, and then we're in the baggage area. And the thing back then was, it seemed that there was some kind of law where you only had about 3 trolleys per 100 people, and you needed a trolley, because you didn't want to get up to the customs official carrying those cases, otherwise your face would be beetroot and it would look very suspicious. So I managed to, stick the elbow in and get three trolleys, and I pushed one to Jim, who said, just made this Popeye gesture, no, I'm going to carry them. I'm a strong man. I'm a lumberjack, after all. And he was a strong man. And then I pushed one to Gilbert, who kind of collapsed onto it. And then I took one for myself. So the baggage carousel, buzzes into life. And the first 2 cases off it are Jim's, these massive big 70-pounders. So he leaps forward, and he puts them down, and he picks them up, and he starts hyperventilating. And then his face starts to go crimson from the exertion. And then he begins to sort of tack and stagger towards the customs officials. And they see this Jim juggernaut coming towards them, and they don't flinch. Jim gets the finger onto the X-ray machine. And he stops, and he's just about to head for the X-ray machine when suddenly his braces burst. And buttons go flying everywhere, and the buckle hits him flat on the back of the neck. And he has a decision to make. Does he hold up his trousers as his little shorts? And does he drop his cases, or hold on to his cases and let his shorts drop to his ankles? What does he do? He chose to hold up his shorts. So the cases go crashing. And he doesn't know what to do. He's just standing there with his mouth opening and shutting. And so this has caused some amusement to the officials, who are all tittering behind their hands. That's the way they did it. And so they decide that he's in such sort of a state of embarrassment that somebody takes a trolley, and they put the 2 big cases. They forget all about putting them onto the X-ray machine, and Jim trots behind them, holding up his trousers. He trots them. He trots into China. Jim had got his Bibles through. Miracle. And meanwhile, what of Gilbert? Because I had I'd taken care to space myself quite a bit away from him, because there were, about 5 lines. Gilbert had somehow, by this time, got his case off the baggage trolley. How he managed that, I don't know. And he went up to the customs official, and sure enough, got the finger onto the X-ray machine with your cases. So he moved over there, and he actually got some help to put the big case onto the x-ray machine. But quick as a flash, he turns around and he takes his little suit carrier and he puts it against the case. And they say, no, you can't do this. And of course there's this tussle of elbows as the case is going into the x-ray machine. And eventually he gives up, but by this time the cases have moved quite far into the x-ray machine. He straightens up and he hits his head on the big iron frame of the x-ray machine, and he falls forward and he goes through the x-ray machine on top of his cases. And there's this wah from the people, because this is quite a sight. And then there's another wah from the people because his teeth come out a little later and he has to get there. But Gilbert is completely concussed. And I wonder what to do. Should I go over and say that, I know who this guy is? But they take care of him and they carry him into China on this chair. And with his case, again, they completely forget about the case. And so Gilbert had got his Bibles in. And only one person that day didn't get their Bibles in. And that was the person who was prayed up, smart-looking, all sorted. And that was me. 3 out of 5. Not a bad percentage in the end. But I learned a lot more about the ways of God that day. As I was traveling back, not with them actually, because I left them there, I was reading a book, and it was by the great Christian journalist called Malcolm Muggeridge. And he had a line in there. He said, Shakespeare, I think, saves his best lines for his fools. And I think God does that too in the kingdom. Does God save his best lines for his fools? Because I used to think when I was traveling and Bible smuggling at this time, I said, where are all the sensible people? Where did they go? They never seem to volunteer for this. It's the Gilbert and the Jims that show up. And then, of course, I thought again of that wonderful title of the Corrie ten Boom booklet, Common Sense Not Required. That's straight out of Church Mediocre. In fact, if I was offering patron saints of Church Mediocre, it would be St. Jim and St. Gilbert. Gilbert died about a year later. He never married, never left much of a dent. Jim died, I think, about 5 years later. Apparently 3 people came to his funeral. He was unmarried. And yet, look what God did to them, through them, that day. And is that enough? Is that a worthwhile life? To be readied in that moment and to be made a miracle? I certainly learned from it. So I think, again, take a hope injection. You might be overlooked. You might be underrated. Perhaps even when you die, you'll be very under-celebrated. But God has a place for you if St. Jim and St. Gilbert are the patron saints of Church Mediocre.